In 1914, the majority of Europeans became enveloped in a great war. The military leadership followed by a strategic Napoleonic form of frontal attack. The new weaponry introduced in World War I would break the barriers of known warfare. The weapons of war would become more important than the manpower. In the next 4 years, they would produce slaughter on a scale never seen before in history. The German army had developed the Schieffelin Plan, which was a fast-moving frontal assault to overturn the French. At the Battle of Marne outside of Paris on September 6, the French counterattacked. This allowed the French to force the Germans to retreat to a series of trenches. By December of 1914, trench warfare. The horrible deadlock on the Western Front had begun. These fortified trenches would extend over 465 miles from the Swiss border to the North Sea, stretching out to a total of 35,000 miles of trenches. Conditions in the trenches became horrific. Life was cheap, skulls and limbs seen scattered in the trenches and through no man's land, and the smell of decomposing bodies lingered everywhere. The French sacrificed lives of thousands of soldiers all to gain a few hundred yards or none at all. The modern weaponry proved to make defense almost impossible. No sooner than one weapon of mass destruction was introduced than plans were being made for a better and more deadly one.
The machine gun, invented by American-born Hiram Maxim in 1884, became a devastating weapon and a major contributor to the casualties of World War I. One machine gun was equal to 100 rifles firing. The Germans quickly grasped the potential importance of the machine gun and began mounting them in the trenches. One squeeze of the trigger could mow down a whole rank of enemies, advancing from the trenches in a matter of seconds. At the Battle of Somme in July 1916, the Germans killed 1,000 British troops in minutes. Lloyd George of the House of Commons is quoted. 80% of all casualties inflicted is by machine gun fire. No country can sustain such slaughter. We must find an answer. And so the barrage of killing advanced.
The trend continues. The flamethrower, a machine that used pressurized air to shoot forth a stream of burning oil up to 40 feet and could flush out troops otherwise unassailable, was introduced. The Germans first used the flamethrower against French troops on February 26, 1915, killing 880 soldiers in 2 days. The French, terrified by the fire and thick black smoke cloud, ran in panic, but were shot as they left the trenches. Soldiers saw the flamethrowers as one of the most terrifying units on the battlefield. The psychological effect of burning to death and watching others be consumed in flames was mentally scarring to soldiers. With the soldiers held in their trenches, there had to be a way to find out information about the enemy. This flimsy machine, made from boards covered with material, open cockpit, no navigational aids except for road maps, and flying along railroad tracks for reference, and safety practically non-existent, would become a major military weapon of World War I.
In World War I, one of the new technologies to enter the war and play a vital part in World War I and then a more important role in future wars was the introduction of the airplane. Being a new invention, there were trial and error as far as many things that happened with the plane. Primarily 3 purposes for the plane. One was reconnaissance, trying to find out where your own troops were, if necessary, and trying to find out where the enemy was. If they discovered the enemy below them, they might drop an aerial flag like this so that the artillery would know where the enemy was and be able to direct their artillery toward them.
One purpose of planes was to shoot troops on the ground by flying low over the trenches. That was a very dangerous endeavor because those in the trenches were able to use their machine guns and rifles to shoot at the planes. The planes being of lightweight metal or fabric, it put the pilots in danger. They would use machine guns like this to shoot troops in the trenches. They would also use them to shoot at other planes in the sky. If one plane was firing against an enemy plane, they called that a dogfight.
Bombing, and they would drop bombs over the side of the plane, being an open cockpit. everything had to be dropped over the side of the plane. Or they might use things like flechettes, which are these aerial darts in the corner, and they would have a box of these in the plane, and they would drop them over the side of the plane. And since they were weighted, the points always pointed down and coming from 1,000, 2,000 feet above the troops. If they hit the troops, they would kill the troops instantly. This was the early aircraft purposes of the war.
Brigadier General William Mitchell. The future of war is not on ground or at sea, but in the air. Who controls the air will control the land. The Germans began taking control of the skies due to technical advances that made planes large enough to carry bombs. To break British resistance, the Germans began to target civilians. This was the first time in history that a major war was all-inclusive, a threat to everyone, military as well as civilian.
As the war in the trenches continued, the German chemist Fritz Haber developed the most lethal weapon of war, poison gas. This is the first time in war that scientists and the military worked in alliance. Haber convinced the Germans that the use of poison gas was an effective way of attacking without direct contact or direct risk, and would win the war for Germany. On April 22, 1915, at the Battle of Ypres, the Germans released poison gas. The deadly release of 150 tons of chlorine gas resulted in 10,000 casualties that day. Willie Sybert is a gas specialist with a unit deploying the first WMD in battle.
As this great cloud of green-gray gas was forming in front of us, we suddenly heard the French yelling.
A French medical officer is among the first victims.
I had the impression that I was looking through green glasses.
The
At the same time, the gas burnt my throat.
Invented gas masks for soldiers to wear for safety from inhaling the chlorine gas. The spiral is now set in motion. The advancement of even more deadly weapons than the last continued. Phosgene gas was the next used by Germans on British troops in December 1915. Phosgene gas was 18 times more lethal than chlorine gas. The worst gas, known as mustard gas, was released by the Germans in 1917. It caused blindness and blistered skin in the respiratory system, causing extremely painful death. 100,000 tons of poison chemicals were used in 4 years of war, resulting in over 1 million casualties. Gas attacks were seen as the most inhumane weapon man had dealt to man.
As the stalemate of the trench warfare continued, a machine that could break through barbed wire of no man's land and cross the trenches needed to be invented. Ernest Winston of the British Army proposed such a machine to Winston Churchill and the newly formed Landship Committee. With their backing, the tank went into battle on September 15, 1916, at the First Battle of Somme. The German soldiers thought they had seen every horror of war. Then off in the distance came a rumbling from giant machines rolling over craters and ditches and crushing barbed wire. It started spitting death from cannons and machine guns, so the German front line ran from the trenches. Tanks in less than 3 years from the drawing board became integral for the Allies' victory. The death toll from these weapons of mass destruction resulted in one of the deadliest conflicts in history of mankind. The total number of civilian and military casualties is estimated at 9 million. World War I was ironically called the war to end all wars. Instead, it was destined to become the first, rather than the last, of such global holocausts. By breaking the barriers of military weapons, these weapons of World War I have become an important chapter in the evolution of military equipment of today.